Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending this presentation. I also would like to thank the organizer for giving me this chance to present what we are doing at the Helmholtz Institute Ulm in the field of electrochemical energy storage for mobile and stationary applications. Some of you knows Helmholtz Institute Ulm pretty well. Anyway, it's an institute in the University of Ulm, but belongs legally to KIT, to the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And it has been established actually 10 years ago. And as a matter of fact, this year, a little bit in September, actually, we will celebrate the 10-year anniversary, which just by chance occurs together with the 200th year of Helmholtz, which is a good coincidence. So if you have the chance, you can come and visit us. Okay. But today I want to actually focus on or talk about the main focus of the Helmholtz Institute Ulm, which is electrochemical energy storage. Lithium-ion batteries have already changed our lives. I mean, the society completely via the, for example, in the medical field, as well as in the mobile communication, and more recently in the electromobility. And as a matter of fact, I mean, this big societal change has been recognized by the Nobel Prize given to the three inventors of lithium-ion batteries, John Goodenough, Stanley Whittingham, and Akira Yoshino. Just by chance, a couple of years ago, together with Dr. Wolfram Merens of the University of ZSW, the Center for Solar Energy and Hydrogen, we organized the meeting, which was one of the last meetings in person before the COVID came. And one of the three Nobel Prizes was actually giving his lecture at this meeting here in Ulm. And during his lecture, he got the phone call from Stockholm communicating that he won the Nobel Prize. So we had the chance to celebrate with him, and this was definitely rather amazing. But let's go to the systems we are talking about, and again, as outcome of this meeting we organized in Ulm, there was this kind of forecast made by important agencies like the German Ministry for Education and Research, the Department of Energy from the US, NATO, which is equivalent to the Department of Energy from Japan, and the Chinese Academy of Science. And from this study, it was clear already, I mean, that lithium-ion batteries will be used at least for the next 10, 15 years to electric vehicles, and maybe they will, the next generation will be lithium metal after lithium-ion. And the reason of this, it's kind of clear to everybody now and relies on the efficiency of lithium-ion batteries compared with, for example, hydrogen fueled vehicle. The energy efficiency is actually extremely higher when we use batteries. You see that we end up, if we start from 100% renewable, we end up using 73% of this energy to power our car. If we have an hydrogen fuel cell based vehicle, we end up only with 22% of the energy we collected from renewable. And if we go with other fancy systems like power to liquid, this percentage goes even lower. So, and electric vehicles powered by batteries are definitely the most efficient way for electromobility. And this is clearly testified by, for example, by the stock market, okay, where Tesla, actual numbers for Tesla is capitalized above 450 billion euros. And this is actually more than the sum of all the largest German car makers or most famous German car makers, BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen, plus Toyota together. Although the overall production of Tesla is kind of very small with respect to these other car makers, but the future is going to be electric, and Tesla is only going for electric vehicles. This is the market in 2020, just to give you an idea, and you see that actually hybrid and full electric vehicle accounted for about 20%, a little bit more than 20% of the market. But if we look in more details, for example, for the last quarter of 2020, we already see that electric vehicles, battery-powered electric vehicles, already accounted for 30% of the market, which is a clear sign that this market is growing substantially and very fast. That's an index which I found just recently, published by a British authority, Transport and Environment, and it gives the idea of the readiness of car makers toward battery-powered electric vehicles. And we see that actually VW, which is a German car maker, but also Volvo, which is hosting us today, they are considered to be the most ready car makers toward the full electrification. So their readiness level reaches 70%. Then there are several other car makers. And what is kind of surprising is Toyota, because Toyota actually started the transition toward electric vehicles more than 20 years ago with the first hybrid car. But in the meantime, they kind of were leftovers by the other car makers, which have accelerated much more in the last few years. And it's also very clear that we are going toward battery-powered electric vehicles by the announcement of that more than maybe 500 now, actually, because they are growing continuously. Hopefully it's not raining. More than 500 new models, new battery-powered electric vehicles will be introduced in the near future. Okay. So, as I said before, all car makers are getting ready for the future. Some more, some less, but all of them will go in this direction. Okay. But this is also obviously reflecting in, for example, the increase of the lithium-ion batteries production. Okay. Which is which is kind of exponential, okay? And we need this because actually batteries, electric cars need a lot of batteries, okay? And for example, the forecast in 2021 for the LEAPS production, okay, in 2030, it's 2 times higher than the forecast made in 2020. So in 1 year, the forecast for lithium-ion batteries in production in 2030 is more than doubled. And this is a clear indication on how much the market is expanding. But this obviously will also cause some problems. This is an estimation we did a few years ago, not many, maybe 4 years ago, about the needs for lithium-ion batteries in the future. We excluded practically stationary storage. We only considered mobile and transportation application. And you see that why we need to increase so much the lithium-ion battery production. I mean, it doesn't matter how many cell phones are made. The total amount of batteries we need for cell phones is nothing compared with the batteries we need to make for an electric vehicle or an electric truck. Okay? But this is also raising some problems like availability of resources. A few years ago, there was a big bubble claiming that lithium would be the problem, that there is not enough lithium to make all these lithium-ion batteries. But this actually came out not to be true because actually there is plenty of lithium on the earth. We just need to develop new ways of extracting it. The real problem associated to lithium-ion battery is actually related to the metals which are used in the positive electrode, so cobalt, nickel, and so on. Especially cobalt is a problem because it's never extracted as cobalt, pure cobalt, but it is always extracted to get the majority of cobalt. You see, only 15% of cobalt is obtained as a cobalt mineral, okay? But 85% of it is obtained as mining of either nickel or copper. And this means that if we want to double the cobalt production, we also need to double the copper production as well as the nickel production. And this is obviously rather expensive. So the real situation is that the lack of cobalt will occur very soon, and already battery materials producers are taking care of reducing cobalt as much as possible. The next one will be nickel, because there is a little bit more nickel than cobalt on the earth, but not too much more. but eventually lithium on the very long term. Nonetheless, we have to think about what's going to be the future, okay? And this is a very interesting graph, which or list, which was made by the European Union a few years ago, listing all those materials which could be there is a significant risk of supply and economic importance. And if we look at the components inside the lithium-ion battery, so lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, copper, these are the main components of a lithium-ion battery, you see that all of them are practically in the list of materials which have a significant screening. So sooner or later, lithium-ion battery will cause a shortage of materials in spite of recycling. And then for all the applications where super high performance is not needed, then we should start to consider different kind of batteries, which most likely the next generation is going to be sodium-ion batteries, because these are the closest or the easiest to produce following exactly the same procedures which are used for lithium-ion. Why is sodium-ion so promising? First, because there is a lot of sodium everywhere, either in the seawater, but also in the salt mines. We will see our carbon also is an important component for the negative electrode, and this is actually obtainable for renewable sources, as well as manganese, iron, and aluminum. These are maybe the three most common metals on the Earth crust. So they are definitely easier to be accessed, okay? And I mentioned sodium-ion have also this great advantage that they are considered a drop-in technology. So we don't need to develop new battery production processes to make these sodium-ion cells. They can be practically produced with the same processes we are using now to make lithium-ion batteries. However, most likely these batteries will never have the same performance of lithium-ion or even lithium metal, or even less lithium metal batteries. So the foreseen application for sodium-ion batteries are like scooters, light-duty vehicles, city buses, for example, so vehicles for which the driving range in a day is well known. You can design the battery in order that this vehicle can make this driving range, and then at night it's going to be charged. Or, also very important, stationary energy storage. This is also a rather important issue that we will get in it a little bit later. So I mentioned the importance of our carbon. The negative electrode of choice for lithium-ion batteries is graphite, but this is actually, it has a huge CO2 footprint because it is either mined in China mostly, which has the largest reserves of natural graphite, or it's produced out of waste products from the oil chain. So, and in both cases, a lot of CO2 is produced to generate this graphite. But there is another family of carbonaceous materials which are called R carbon. And the main difference between the two materials is that when we heat them up to very high temperature, graphite tend to crystallize, forming a very defined crystalline structure. The same does not occur for R carbons. They always remain somehow having a chaotic structure, which on the other hand is extremely important for sodium ion, because sodium ions cannot be intercalated in graphite. They can only be stored inside R carbon. And now it's raining, I'm very sorry for you guys. So, but what is very interesting about R carbon is that usually these materials, the R carbon comes out of the carbonization of organic compounds, for example, or natural compounds, okay? And because of their structure, they maintain this kind of chaotic disorder, which then allows the storage of sodium ion. And now we have the bells. So the most interesting precursors for R carbon, so the material of choice for the negative electrode of sodium ion batteries, it's actually bio-waste. Okay, and bio-waste is an abundant and cheap raw material, because anyway we produce a huge amount of bio-waste to feed the people, okay? And in many cases this bio-waste is not useful. You cannot do anything with it. You actually have to spend a lot of money to trash it, okay? This is because, for example, the bio-waste can fermentate and then it cannot be used as a food for animals because of the high water content and other problems associated, like inefficient biogas transformation or bioethanol generation, okay? And here in Ulm, actually, one of my Chinese PhD students had the idea to transform in hard carbons the apples that you can harvest on the Friedrichsau, and he started this work. I was kind of complaining with him because he did it, and I thought that he was wasting his time. Then I went to Japan, and my Japanese friends told me, what is so special about this material you are showing? Because we don't get the same performance. And then I was kind of very interested by this, and we started to work on the conversion of bio-waste into hard carbons, and we are now progressing quite a lot. So why it is so important to use bio-waste to make a sodium-ion battery? Well, we have investigated, we have made investigation on this, and it is a very complicated system, but what we have identified at the very end is that the three most impacting categories for lithium-ion or sodium-ion batteries are actually the global warming potential, which is associated to the cathode material, the positive electrode material production. This is because positive electrode materials require very high temperature for the synthesis, okay? And then the fossil depletion potential. Obviously, we are using a lot of fossil fuels to generate energy to treat these materials. And specifically for sodium-ion anode production is the marine eutrophication potential. What is this? This is a big problem caused, for example, in the Mediterranean Sea. I come from Italy, so I see this very well. Because to grow biomaterial for example, producing hard carbon, then you have to use a lot of fertilizer. And this fertilizer ends up in the ocean or in the sea. And this then generates the growth of algae, seaweeds, which then put the whole environment in danger, okay? So this is actually a very important impact generated, caused by the production of organic compounds, compounds for electrode production. Okay, so we did this study, and obviously we investigated the impact per kilowatt hour of energy stored in the battery for the entire lifetime. This is very important. You should not only concentrate on how much charge you can put in a battery in one charge, but it is very important to consider how many times also you can recharge this battery. And then it came out actually that, something unexpected, for example, like the lithium iron phosphate battery using also graphite at the anode, it's actually pretty good. It has pretty low values for all impact categories, okay? While other, for example, the LMO graphite has much higher. And the reason of this impact, this battery chemistry to have higher impact, is that this battery chemistry can cycle much less than a lithium iron phosphate graphite battery. So this is very important. And you see that also for sodium ion, where the negative electrode is produced out of sugar, this was actually the standard production process a few years ago, do not really have pretty good numbers in terms of impact, okay? Nonetheless, if you can use bio-waste, so an organic material that is anyway produced in order to generate food, then the impact factor goes down a lot. Okay, so it is extremely important for sodium-ion batteries to be really sustainable and more environmentally friendly than lithium-ion battery, that we use bio-waste for the negative electrode. Okay, and we are exploring these hard carbon produced from bio-waste within, for example, one project which is funded by the German Ministry for Education and Research. Rain is increasing, I'm sorry for you. but and in which we are also trying to investigate more sustainable positive electrodes. Okay, this is very important. In particular, we are only working on positive electrode materials which do not contain any cobalt, because as I mentioned before, cobalt is going to be, there is not much cobalt available, but also we are trying actually to decrease as much as possible the nickel content and increase as much as possible the iron and manganese content. Okay, so this is our target within this BMBF funded project. Also, always in order to increase the sustainability of new batteries, what we are focusing in as a binder, which is one important component of the electrode, we are trying to move toward water processable binders rather than solvent processable binders. And especially we are focusing on binders, which are polymers, natural polymers, which we can extract from natural resources like cellulose and so on, which is very important. And already that's very important for sustainability. And we have already developed a very simple, I mean, a few years ago, cell chemistry in which we use our carbon from corn cobs. Corn cobs are corn is produced in Germany, for example. There are many other sources, but corn is one of the agricultural products of Germany that contains a nickel and cobalt-free cathode, and that in which both electrodes are put together or hold together using a cellulose-derived aqueous binder, and you see that we can get pretty good reversibility and cycle and stability. So it's clear that this is feasible. It is possible to go toward a much higher sustainability of batteries. We just need to work in this direction. In terms of worldwide sodium cell production, for example, there are already some examples in China. They are definitely pushing, especially in China. There is already a small car realized by, let's say, a startup from a Chinese Academy of Science Institute, as well as battery energy storage system for stationary storage, and CATL, which is actually will become very soon one of the largest producer of lithium-ion batteries for cars. CATL has a lot of plans to expand in Germany for production. They recently announced that they will also start large-scale production of sodium-ion cells. But the next big achievement that sodium, or anyway, that we need to as electrochemists, as battery scientists, that we are targeting is actually the decarbonization of Europe by the year 2050. I mean, a few years ago, the European Union decided that we will go toward a fully decarbonized union. And by 2050, this is definitely possible based on the transition to renewable energies. As a matter of fact, Germany recently changed these targets. Before, they committed to use 80% of renewable energies by 2050, but this year, the German government actually announced that they will achieve 100% renewable energies by the year 2045. So they are actually Germany is actually shortening the previous limit, which is, I would say, very, very good. Okay? So just to give you an idea what we have to do, though, I mean, to achieve this target. This is the net energy consumption in Germany 2 years ago. I took 2019, not 2020, because I did not want to show the year affected by COVID. Okay, 2019, we can consider it as a standard year, more or less. And you see that the overall energy need in 2019 of Germany was 2,500 terawatt hour. This number is huge. Most of you, I don't know if you have a clue what is a terawatt hour, but it's a huge number, okay? And more or less, the consumption is split to like 1/3 between transportation, industry, and households, plus a little bit of other activity. So if we really, right now, we are addressing this issue, transportation. I mean, by the year 2035, more or less, there will be only electric vehicles running on the street. These are the targets fixed by most of the car makers in Europe, okay? So let's say that this target will be achieved in the next 10, 15 year maximum. The problem is that we will need to supply energy to the batteries in the cars, and this means that we need to store a lot of energy, not only for industry and households, but also for the cars themselves in some way. Okay? And right now, we don't have any way to store renewable energies. So we really need to come up with new systems to solve this problem. That's another, yeah. I wanted to show this to show the difference between the net energy consumption and actually the overall energy consumption, okay? Here we have 3,600 terawatt hour. That means that about, in Germany every year, we just waste 1/3 of the energy we generate, or because we cannot make use of it. I mean, so it's clear that we need to improve quite a lot in also in the conversion of energy. When we want to store it, we need to improve to increase the efficiency of conversion. Renewables are, Germany is doing pretty well. You see that renewables are growing very fast, okay? And the fossil fuels as well as nuclear, this was a decision of Germany to close all the nuclear power plants, are definitely going down. But this is also raising the next problem, which this is in German. Some of you can read it, others cannot. So there is more solar energy, more wind energy, but you can always have a day in which it's raining and there is no wind, okay? And then more energy storage would then be the key to solve the problem. Presently, the European Union, Germany and the European Union are actually pushing quite a lot on hydrogen. Okay, so develop energy storage, energy system which is based on clean hydrogen. However, we also need to be aware of a little bit of history. The hydrogen economy was actually proposed by John Bockris. Maybe some of you have studied on his book, okay, in 1970, so 51 years ago. Okay, and after 50 years of research and development and innovation, we still do not have a complete hydrogen solution. So definitely there are still problems associated with hydrogen. Storage is still an issue. Nobody wants to have a huge amount of hydrogen stored in his house. Okay. There are still some problems with electrolyzer and fuel cells. There are problems associated with hydrogen embrittlement. And as I showed earlier, I guess it's a wedding, okay? And as I showed earlier, the hydrogen, the best you can get with hydrogen is actually a low round trip efficiency. So you cannot get more than 30% efficiency out of a hydrogen-based economy. This means that you need to gather 3 times at least the energy by renewable in order to have a system based on hydrogen, which is definitely a lot. And safety, as I mentioned before, okay? So I'm not saying that we should not go for hydrogen. I mean, hydrogen is definitely a possibility. In the worst case, we just need to collect more renewables. But I think we should also be looking for other approaches, possible approaches. And as stated by a German scientist long ago, I like this because, I mean, this was more than 100 years ago. He said that the path leading to the solution of the most difficult of all technological questions, the delivery of cheap energy, must be discovered by electrochemistry. I'm an electrochemist. Okay. So that's definitely my target. So what are the alternative ways we can explore further for energy storage? It's nothing very new. Already in the 70s of last centuries, there were proposals using metals as energy storage medium instead of hydrogen, or right now we're using oil, but the problem is that we cannot regenerate oil. We are just using the oil that has been accumulated in the last few millions years, or even more than few millions. Okay, reactive metals though are rather interesting because reactive metals can be produced, for example, with an electrochemical process. So we just need electricity coming from renewable, and then it can be either burned directly and to generate energy, okay, or, and this is where electrochemistry plays a role again, it can be actually transformed into electricity using again an electrochemical process. Okay, aluminum, for example, this is a case of burning, okay, which we already analyzed. Aluminum actually here, it's in terms of specific energy, so in versus weight, has much less energy than hydrogen, okay? It's about 1/3 or even 1/4. But if we look at the energy density, so the kilowatt hour per liter, it is much, much higher than hydrogen. Because aluminum has a density of about 3 kilograms per liter, and hydrogen has a much lower density, okay? So what we calculated here is some calculation in terms of energy storage. How much volume do I need to store 1 terawatt hour of energy? And these are the calculations. So you see that the volume for aluminum is extremely small compared with hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen, or compressed hydrogen, at least 1 order of magnitude. And these consider only the volume of the active material. But now you can put 1 cubic meter of aluminum here and nothing will happen. You will not rush away. But if I put 1 cubic liter of hydrogen here, 1 cubic meter of hydrogen here, all of you would rush crazy because, I mean, we need much more than the volume maybe of all this stuff to keep the hydrogen either compressed or at the liquid state, okay? So what we calculated is that a football field covered with 5 meters of aluminum correspond to 1 terawatt hour storage, okay? And in Germany, there are 30,000 football teams, okay? So they must have at least one field each to play, okay? So we need less than 10% of the football fields available, existing in Germany, to store all the energy that Germany needs for 1 year, which is not too much, actually, if you think about it, okay? And anyway, in a cubic meter of aluminum, you can store 25 megawatt hour, which is a big number. This is far exceeding the consumption of a family for 1 year. And none of us would have any problem in having a cubic meter of aluminum in the basement. I mean, we already have a lot of aluminum in our houses, okay? So it's kind of regular for us, normal for us. I don't think any of us would love to have the equivalent in hydrogen. Another very interesting energy carrier is sodium. I mentioned before why sodium is so interesting, because actually sodium can be as about 3-4 times the volumetric energy density of hydrogen, okay? And we have experimentally demonstrated actually the overall round-trip efficiency, never forget this, for a sodium storage as metal and then using an electrochemical cell to regenerate electricity as an efficiency of 85%. This is like almost 3 times the overall, the round-trip efficiency of hydrogen. Okay. And the other great advantage is that if we extract sodium from seawater, we are actually producing desalinized water, which can be used, for example, for industrial uses, agriculture, and so on. So this is, especially in the southern countries, this is extremely important. Okay. And very finally, during discharge, we produce sodium hydroxide, which would help us to trap CO2 from the atmosphere with no cost. because we just react the outgoing water with air and we trap CO2. So, in general, sodium seawater-based systems are very interesting for energy storage and power generation. So it is a kind of strange chemistry, because how do you can store energy using seawater? Well, this is possible because seawater contains a huge amount of sodium, about 10 grams of sodium per kilogram of water, which is a lot, okay? And this is a collaboration we started a few years ago together with a group in Korea. They are a little bit farther ahead of us, but we are trying to catch them as soon as possible. So that's the principle. How is the energy stored? We extract sodium from seawater and we put in a reservoir. I don't enter into the chemical reaction, that may be too complicated. So during excess production of renewables, we can store sodium in a certain volume, and then when we need the energy back, we just reverse the reaction and we can produce electricity, okay? And the overall energy of the system is actually proportional to the amount of sodium we can store. So what we are trying to do now is to increase as much as possible the amount of sodium we can store in this system. Again, I do not enter into the details, but these are some examples of what we can do. For example, we can accumulate sodium metal. So this is the storage of energy. We harvest sodium from seawater and we accumulate it as sodium metal, and this is demonstrated experimentally. We can then, for example, discharge the sodium metal and produce electricity again. Okay, so we can have power generation. You can consider, for example, this is very interesting for sea transportation. I mean, not only submarines, but also ships. Instead of loading oil in a port, you load sodium, and then you have plenty of seawater, and you just produce energy out of it, and you can trash whatever is formed into the seawater itself, because you are just putting back the sodium from where it belongs, okay? And based on this idea, actually, we were at HIU, we were successful of getting a large European project funded, which is called STORIES. So Storage Research Infrastructure Ecosystem. This project is not much experiments. It will also include experiments, but it's mostly devoted to the establishment of an ecosystem for the investigation of energy storage, because this is going to be the big problem in 15, 20 years when we will not use oil anymore to produce energy. So we need to have all the energy we need stored. I mean, if we get a very cold winter with no wind, then we are in serious trouble, because we need to have something to produce energy. And this is the idea. Now this is very clear to the European Union, and then they decided to start this kind of formation of ecosystem, okay? It's pretty well distributed throughout Europe. Also UK is still in. There are some big partners. There are some amazing partners, like, for example, the Italian oil company, but also the French electric company, EDF. So it's clear that also oil companies are looking, okay, what do we do in the future when nobody will use oil anymore? Okay. Total is becoming, for example, a battery producer. Maybe you have heard of it. I mean, they are all looking for other applications. Yeah, and this is the structure. So, as I mentioned before, there will be some services offered to scientists, but most of the project will be focusing on the establishment of this ecosystem that also includes, for example, the formation of students, of doctors, let's say, which I have clear in mind that we have to look at this problem, because right now we are not seriously considering any solution for the long-term seasonal and annual energy storage. You can watch a video on YouTube if you like. And I just want to conclude going back to sodium, that sodium-based batteries can help addressing several and rather different energy storage issues. So they can support sustainable transportation, for example, for this kind of vehicles. So not the top of the field, but definitely those vehicles that have less requirements. Okay, it can actually help for the marine transportation, making use of the sodium seawater battery, but also it can help for the delocalized power generation for the EV charging infrastructure. The European Commission is now launching an initiative that in all Europe, there should be an electric vehicle charging station every 60 kilometers on the highways, which is more or less replacing all the charging stations that are now present on the highways with electric charging station. But we don't have the grid to support all this electricity on the highways. So, for example, generating electricity in situ by using a reactive metal as a charge carrier can be the solution to this problem, immediate solution to this problem. Okay? And then on the energy storage, which has huge market perspective, definitely sodium-ion batteries can help for the stationary storage, but also the seasonal, annual, electrochemical, and hybrid storage via reactive metals. And with this, I want to conclude, acknowledging obviously the funding, but also my group. A lot of people is here. And also, I would like to recommend citizens in Ulm to visit Akkuhalle, where all these problems are very well stressed, actually, especially the problem associated with the seasonal and annual storage. There is a kind of black tunnel in which you can enter and get a feeling of what it means not having enough energy storage, long-term energy storage, if a cold winter comes. And I would like to thank everybody for the attention.